It's round one as we put the two most popular mirrorless lightweights in the ring. In this corner, with a much larger 4/3 sensor, weighing in at 16 million pixels, the Sultan of Selfie, the Panasonic Lumix GF7. And in this corner, with 21 million pixels packed on a tiny 1-inch frame, the fastest shot in the West, the Nikon 1J5. Like this, you can see the screen of the J5 is already partially blocked by the body. Right from the opening bell, the Lumix is falling behind. Remove the cap, manually extend the kit zoom first, while the Nikon's included lens has a fast powered cap, extension, and zoom ring. Now let's say the sun goes down, or you're just indoors, and you get this feeling like, I think I'll take a selfie. Well, this is what it's gonna look like. The overlapping pop-up flashes make composition difficult, especially in the Nikon, while the towering display of the Lumix really shines here. The price for these is almost the same. It varies by country and at different times, but they are both now under $500 US, not including the price of all the extra batteries you're definitely going to need. The Panasonic taking a hit here with its less convenient kit lens, while the Nikon's one-touch close and cap lens is very nice. Now the Panasonic GF7 is generally less expensive because it's a few months older than the Nikon. Looking at the side, we can see the Nikon has a very welcomed grip, and they've stuck an NFC chip into it. And there's the function button, and on the other side is the lens release. The Lumix has a more flat and uncluttered front. That's the lens release. Nikon is the only one with this control dial on top. It changes the shutter speed in manual modes. It's not necessary if you only use full auto exposure modes. Otherwise, it is. Look at the Panasonic. This is how you change the shutter speed and aperture using just one dial on the back, and it's often counterintuitive. It took me a long time to figure out, and I almost had to read the manual. Press up to go down. Why are both settings red, and what does SS mean? It's a deal breaker if you sometimes use manual modes. With the Nikon you get better control. Just spin to the right to speed up. The shutter release button is surrounded by the power switch, same as the Lumix, the mode dial, stereo microphones, and the flash pops up the top there. The Panasonic is similar with the mode selector dial, the shutter, but instead of the control dial we get this AI button. And the idea here is that if you do decide to play with some of the manual settings and you get lost and you screw things up, you'll still have this backup button. Stereo microphones and the flash directly on the middle bump. And it has the function button on top instead of in front like on the Nikon. The rear looks about the same, but with slightly scrambled button positions. Panasonic smartly puts the record button on the back instead of the top, so it doesn't get confused with the shutter, which will happen on the Nikon. The Lumix has a more cheap plastic look to its backside, and here's a mechanical flash release. While the Nikon has more glass and metal and appears more flush and precise, free of that big lump on top of the Lumix. And the faux leather has been continued on the rear, which is nice. The screen on the GF7 flips up 180 degrees on a strong hinge, but that's all it does. The Nikon goes up 180 degrees too, but it also goes down 90 degrees for overhead shots. And it articulates pretty far from the body, which can come in handy. It's better than the Lumix screen, except at the one thing it was designed for: selfies. The Nikon has an electronic flash release here, and under this crappy port cover you'll find HDMI and USB sockets. The Lumix also gives you HDMI, but has an AV out digital plug too. The bottoms of these cameras are nearly identical. Covers open exactly the same way, revealing the battery and memory card that all come out the same way. Panasonic has kept with the good old standard SD card, but Nikon uses the micro SD instead. Now, if you choose the Nikon, you should be aware that the micro SD card has been determined to be the leading cause of RDC. Please take a moment to watch this public service announcement about RDC. The Nikon has a hidden door so you can thread an AC adapter through when working in the studio. It's one of the many features unique to the J5 that's aimed at more serious photographers. Now, this is the reason I am most unhappy with the Nikon. This battery has the shortest life of any I've ever used in any type of electronic device. I've been very careful, only turning on the camera just a few seconds before the shot, and then turning it off immediately afterwards. Still, I can only get a few hours out of this 850 milliamp hour battery. I haven't spent as much time shooting with the Lumix yet, but it's even smaller at 680 milliamp hours, and a larger, more power-hungry sensor, so don't expect it to be any better. Okay, let's see what's inside. Removing the lens from the GF7 causes the manual zoom to extend if you're not careful. The power-loaded Nikon comes off easy. The Panasonic lens is slimmer on the outside, but has a much larger rear element than the Nikon. It's needed for its larger 4/3 sensor. The lenses have similar zoom ranges and the same maximum f-stops at an unimpressive 3.3 to 5.6. These slow kit lenses make it mostly impossible to shoot video in low light. However, their built-in stabilization works great for low light still images at low shutter speeds. The Lumix widest 12mm setting is actually wider than the Nikon's 10mm, making the Lumix much better for arm's length selfies. But at the other end of the zoom ring, the Nikon throws a longer telephoto punch. The Nikon has been tested sharper than the Panasonic, but we will examine our own photos in round 2. The sensor in the Lumix is more than 40% larger than the Nikon, so a larger sensor should make for a better picture, right? But the Nikon packs in 30% more pixels on that small sensor. So more pixels should make a better picture, right? Well, again, in round 2 we will turn the confusing numbers into clear pictures in side-by-side comparisons of output from both cameras, so stay tuned. The Lumix lens goes on easily. The Nikon even better, with a raised indicator, so you don't need to look at the lens first to align it with the camera. Which one is bigger? Looks like the Lumix, except the Nikon is so fat. They both seem to weigh about the same, but the Nikon is actually a tiny bit lighter. Probably came out of the battery. With lenses extended, it's even more clear the J5 is morbidly obese compared to the GF7. The Lumix has Mega OIS and accepts 37mm screw-in filters. Forget about filters for the Nikon, but you're gonna love the built-in cap and the way it pops to life. The touchscreen displays look and work almost the same, just like your smartphone with touch focus and gestures. Off. On. Here the Lumix starts up faster than the Nikon because the lens is already open and extended. The menus work the same, but the Nikon has gone for a clean and clear look, forgoing even color except for the yellow highlighter. Use the wheel or your finger to navigate the maze. Panasonic is sticking with the colorful Windows XP look, with its shaded buttons and crude graphics. You will stumble over many more bells and whistles in the Panasonic's menus than on the Nikon's. Some are actually useful, such as the selfie options. But of all the new features, I like this one the best: smartphone remote control. Here the Nikon is sending a live view to the phone through Wi-Fi. You can trigger the shutter at any time. The viewfinder in the camera stays off though. No other controls, but you can adjust the exposure some. Now here is Panasonic's camera control. Look at this, you have full control of the camera. White balance, shutter speed, aperture, anything. And you could still see the live view in the camera at the same time. It's amazing and it really stands out against the Nikon. If you think you'll be doing any remote control of your camera, then the only choice is the Lumix here. And best of all, you can start and stop recording of a video, unlike the Nikon. At the end of round 1, the important differences between our contenders goes like this. The Lumix is still the undisputed selfie champ and offers amazing full-featured remote control, but the Nikon One is still in the fight with quality slow-motion video and blazing fast continuous shooting that the Lumix can't match. If you shoot any kind of action, you have to choose the J5, and with a dedicated thumb wheel, it's oriented more towards a serious photographer. Similar looks, comparable abilities. Maybe you are more concerned about the smell. Well, they both smell of flux. Or the sound. You can actually feel a click when the Lumix shutter is triggered. I like it. If you are still not sure, then watch round 2 next, where we'll put our contenders in a side-by-side shootout and examine the images and videos from both cameras. Which will produce the sharpest images with the greatest tonal range? Will the larger sensor of the Lumix beat out more pixels and a better lens of the Nikon? Stay tuned.